Hello friends, this is Dr. Benjamin Smith, lecturer in philosophy at Catholic Studies Academy. I want to spend a few moments with you addressing the question of how we know the difference between good and evil. How do we know if an action is good or bad? In order to answer this question objectively, we need a sound and objective standard, and that's provided for us in the Aristotelian tradition. The basic standard of virtue is this: you should always act in a way that is proportionate and consistent with who and what you are. I'll say that again. You should always act in a way that's consistent with who and what you are. Fathers should not neglect their children. Citizens should serve their community. And of course, as rational animals, we should seek the truth insofar as we can according to our circumstances and abilities. I think this is a very sound general standard for moral evaluation, and I've talked about it in more detail in previous videos. But we need more than a general standard. Very often, moral evaluation, ethical evaluation, requires us to kind of get down into the weeds and do a more granular evaluation of human actions. And thankfully, St. Thomas and others have developed criteria to help us to do this. Now, discussing the various elements of this criteria is sort of complicated, and I'll pursue that in future videos. But for now, I just want to lay out the basic criteria for evaluating a human action. And the basic criteria is this. These are sometimes called the moral elements of the human act. An action needs to be evaluated according to the object, according to the end, and according to the circumstances. I'll say it again: the object, the end, and the circumstances. So what's the object of an action? The object of an action is just the very thing being done. What is it that you're doing, right? For right now, I'm talking about philosophy. You could say I'm teaching some philosophy right now. That's the very thing being done. I'm communicating information and ideas about philosophy to other people who are interested in learning about philosophy. That's the kind of thing I'm doing. If you're playing a game, the kind of thing you're doing is the object of your action is the very game itself. If you're playing chess, the object of your action is chess. So the object, again, is just the thing being done. You could put it this way: the object of an action answers the question, what? What did he do? What did you do? Right? What is being done? That's the object of the action. And it's an important element of human action, an important element of moral evaluation. In addition to that, we also need to think about the intended end. Now, technically, I would call this the remote end. That is that for the sake of which we're doing something, right? So again, I'm teaching here. Now, why am I teaching here? Well, the very thing I'm doing is the object, that's the teaching. But then you could ask about the motive. Well, there's several motives, and there are therefore several ends of my teaching. One, this is part of my duties as a member of Catholic Studies Academy, so I'm fulfilling my obligations to my colleagues in the Academy. Also, two, I enjoy it. I enjoy talking about philosophy and ethics. Another end here is that I like sharing it with other people. And so your good and your learning of these ideas is part of my intended end. So again, we have the question of what is being done. That's addressed by the object of the action. In addition, we can address the question, why is it being done? And the answer to that question is the end, the intended end of the action. Lastly, we have the circumstances of the action, right? So the circumstances of the action include the time, the place, and I would say the foreseeable but unintended consequences. So where are you doing it? When is it being done? And what followed after? What were the consequences? Unintended but foreseeable. All right, that last category is a little difficult. Sometimes people have a hard time differentiating between consequences and intentions, but I think we can actually distinguish this fairly sharply if we just think about it for a minute. An intention, an end that is intended, is what you're aiming for, what you're shooting for. And that's, in teaching, that can be a variety of things, as I've already said, but certainly one of the ends is the learning of the students. One of the circumstances, that is one of the unintended but foreseeable consequences of teaching, is that sometimes your students are bored. Sometimes your students will experience indifference. And if you're in a formal institutional setting, educational setting, you may be one of the things you'll do as a teacher is grade. And you may have to fail a student or give a student a bad grade, in which case the student will suffer pain of either regret or frustration or sorrow. That's not an intention, the intention of the teacher. A teacher doesn't set out intending to fail students or cause them pain. But if you're at all wise or thoughtful about it, if you become a teacher, you know that at some points it's foreseeable but unintended that you will cause pain to your students, especially students to whom you have to give a bad grade. So to just sum up here very briefly, um, when we're looking at evaluating an action, we need to evaluate it in terms of proportionality. That is, does it fit with, is it consistent with the general standard of virtue? Is it consistent with who and what I am? Is it consistent with who and what I am according to the object, according to the intended end, and according to the circumstances, right? So is the very thing being done consistent with who and what I am? Is my intention consistent with the action and myself? And then finally, are the circumstances appropriate and fitting to the general standard of virtue? Well, there's a lot packed in there if you really start to think about it. In subsequent videos, I'll go into each of those elements of moral evaluation and talk about how we can apply them and some of the challenges that come up in applying the moral elements of the human act. I hope you found these comments edifying and useful. Until next time, God bless.